It's not in the cards for you. I'm pretty good at insults, and I got the internet and a lot of free time.
So what we're doing here today is there's a bunch of Lucas's websites that I've got archived on virtualwern.com, and two of the best parts that haven't really been gone over in videos, if you want like the facts and all of that. Walter Fate has gone through those a couple of times, I think, so there's no need for me to redo those. But back around, I think it was 2005 or 2006. It was in the George H.W. Bush whatever era, because he mentions Bush a few times in there. He tried to form a libertarian socialist party, and that section's on the site, but it's a bunch of just boring word salad, and it ends in a rant about Jesus and all kinds of shit that doesn't make sense because it's Lucas. But in 2019, he had it up briefly before it was deleted, before the page was gone, something that he called the Assembly. And this was his idea for like a one world, some kind of like socialistic government. And it's honestly one of the funniest things I've ever read, but I don't think he was intending for it to be funny. He was kind of intending for it to be serious, which honestly makes it funnier. Um, and it reads to me a bit like if you took Orwell's 1984 but made it really, really fucking stupid. So, so sorry about any background noise. I've got birds, I've got cats, and it's muting it as best it can. This is a cheap ass mic that I got for 20 bucks. Don't come for me. So this was from September 16th, 2019, and he called it the Assembly. It was a section of his last Weebly page that had the cute older daddy fact and all of that shit on it. And I I kind of want to read it verbatim, but I know I'm not going to be able to get through it without saying a bunch of just nonsense whenever I hit it, because it starts out with nonsense. So the assembly was his idea for a direct democracy, and the assembly could propose and vote on anything over a secure internet connection. There is, of course, no technical or even abstract explanation about what that would mean, because Lucas barely knows how to use his phone. There would be laws, though, that would not change. In use, theft and property in use destruction. What the? Not even two paragraphs in. Theft and property in use destruction would still be illegal, including pollution. Okay. Murder and violence illegal unless all involved signed a digital waiver. So you uh, that, I'm not going to think about that too hard. War illegal unless this an adult wrote this. He was 40. I think he was 40 that year, turning 40 that year. An adult wrote this in all seriousness. An adult wrote this and thought it was a great idea. Fucking adult. War illegal unless from a threat off world or from a Federation of Planets type thing or an illegal uprising. Not explained what that is. He's expecting what the damn Enterprise to attack Earth. I don't. Maybe in the mirror universe. I don't. It would be a terrible episode. They probably already made it in one of the series. Drugs and sex under 18 illegal unless for medical reasons approved by a doctor. No sex under 16, period. Drugs otherwise allowed recreationally as long as duties were not diminished. Rape also illegal unless someone signed a waiver allowing them to be hunted for sexual purposes. Okay. Sex with animals illegal. Harassment illegal unless under signed consent. Is he just listing off his kinks again? Bribery and blackmail illegal. Measures applying to certain people would only be voted on by those people. Find women, for example, only women would vote on them. No separatist measures allowed. You couldn't just vote to make it illegal for white people to listen to rap music or black people to be given a free car, for instance. Those are very oddly specific things he came up with there. Getting rid of the assembly illegal. He's dropping the word is everywhere. Well, other than that, the people could propose and vote on anything. No proposals or votings on weekends unless emergency determined by the 11-person council at the top of each enterprise, which is not explained. which would be a bit like a cabinet to be dissolved and replaced after 1 year unless the assembly decided the 11 were operating at a minimum of 80% approval in the yes-no fashion for the entire group as a whole. Holy fucking redundancy. After 5 years, each would be judged one by one to reach 80% or replaced. After the longest serving member had served for 10 years on a council, the entire council at that time would be dissolved and replaced with new individuals. There's no process listed as for how that would happen. The longest serving member would either be promoted or transferred along with the others to the other enterprises as per the choices of those individuals if approved by the assembly as a whole of those enterprises of any size for the new transfer. You just fucking said they would be dissolved after 10 years, and now you're saying they can just be transferred to a new department. And how did. A lot of goddamn internet voting, Lucas. Okay, but fine. It would take 5 working days for proposals to be voted on, fixed, or thrown out, unless a shorter time period was voted on for the decision. 10% of the jurisdiction where measures would apply would have to vote at bare minimum for the measure to pass in 5 days or less, and voters would get a yes, no, or one chance per person to offer a correction. Correction would have 1 hour to be read. This is worldwide, by the way. When you're keeping these times in perspective, this is a worldwide government. The correction would have 1 hour to be read and allowed to be voted upon or thrown out as nonsensical or unnecessary as per assembly decision. There is not enough time in the day for this to happen. The correction would have 24 hours or less to be approved or discarded as a change to the measure by the same rules, and there would be 5 corrections allowed per measure on a first come, first served basis unless discarded. This is like his board games, only somehow worse. After 5 approved changes were voted on, the measures would sit as is or return to original format within 1 hour or less. Of those 10% at minimum, anything over 50% would pass or fail the measure. It's not even halfway done. Votes affecting groups of individuals that did not belong to any official division, such as individuals in encounters with others, may be law enforcement or spontaneous assemblies of folks, like crowds at events, at random, inside establishments, music groups, classrooms, people in an argument needing advice, would go to the World Assembly and be decided on in a yes-no fashion from a pool of an odd number that would convene in 5 seconds, given any percentage vote in these spontaneous, unofficial decisions affecting one individual person or groups formed at random. What? Does his head just look like a ball of string that's like all knotted up inside? Because I'm not. Brains could not come up with this. This is not a brain. It's not even a big brain, small brain. This is knotted, matted ball of yarn. Okay. I took political science classes in college. This was a hobby of mine. This is. I can't even begin to explain where everything about this is stupid and wrong and not possibly work. It's like something a 5-year-old would come up with when they're trying to make one of those complex imaginary games on the playground, but like nobody wants to play with them because their games are so fucking complicated and pointless. That's this. That's what this is. That's what all of Lucas's games are, but especially this stupid idea. There's more. All official divisions could also vote to lower their 5-day or 1-day decision-making process to anything less than the maximum of no less than 5 seconds. The assembly would be worldwide, but there could be votes that apply to smaller areas like apartment buildings, towns and countries, or even continents and hemispheres where only those who lived or worked in those areas could vote. Again, random unofficial conglomerations would also be allowed to be set up to follow the rules for unofficial grouping. Does he know how time works? Again, anything affecting a town or a neighborhood within that town would have 24 hours. Anything not determined to be government divisions, such as businesses, schools, etc., would be 5-second decisions. That's not impulsive at all. For those who were awake and voting under the 10% minimum participation required rule, awake and voting as opposed to asleep and dead and voting. How the, the grammar is even. Half the people in each building or structure where the people slept would be on a nocturnal schedule, the other half diurnal. He's using big boy words here. If individuals were asleep during their assigned waking schedule and do not vote, that would be their decision. If over 90% were asleep or abstaining when they were supposed to participate, then 10% would be roused at random and asked to participate by an alarm. An alarm. An alarm. So nocturnals could switch with diurnals at any time in the period as long as they split evenly and entered into the network system consensually. All structures where people slept would always consist of an even number of people, or one computerized random would be entered temporarily. All enterprises would be in operation 24 hours a day. Everyone, that's a weird living situation. Everyone would be given a universal basic income of 100 credits per year, and they would be given a wage of 100 credits per year for working any job. They could only save 1,000 credits. Okay. All right. No one would be forced to work more than 30 hours a week, 5 days a week, with 6 weeks of the 52-week year devoted to mandatory vacation time, with maternity and paternity leave mandatory for 3 months for new parents, and a 3-child per person limit, followed by reversible sterilization, which can be raised or lowered depending on an over or underpopulation crisis, as decided upon by the Assembly and guiding scientific council, with full job coverage and job security for all periods of work leave, depending on the health matters and vacation time served. What? In fact, there would be several 11-person scientific guidance councils within their fields for approval and disapproval by the Assembly in all matters affecting those fields, determined by peers in their fields and jurisdictions where applied. He's just mashing big sounding words together. Independent of committees that serve only to proffer advice, but would of course be part of the assemblies like anyone else. So they're useful. Smallest scientific council would be at the business level, including schools counted as enterprises like businesses. All right. Every town and city would have a council higher up to the world level. The council would vote with their assemblies and could not veto as individuals or as a group. After all resource costs were covered for all businesses, all accesses would be given to the assembly at largest to decide upon use. Businesses that served the planet would have their excesses decided on by the World Assembly. Businesses that by majority only affect a city would divide their excesses to the city as the city assembly, or smaller saw fit, under the guidance of the scientific council advising, as long as those excesses were not given to groups of people under 11 and never for personal use. That is a bunch of goddamn word salad. And eat some more salad. Still more. There's still more. There's still more. This is much longer than I thought it was going to be. Any enterprises, including schools and government departments, not seen as being productive to the good to those they served, would be helped out by fixers or eliminated. Automation would be favored over human labor, and all human powered jobs would be filled because people liked the work and had a particular talent for the task, according to the scientific councils guiding those endeavors in the assembly that serve that area. Each enterprise, including businesses, schools, governments, departments, etc., would be headed by 11-person boards known as aforementioned the committee. That is not aforementioned. This is the first time the fucking committee has come up. You don't know what the word aforementioned means, just admit it. Would effectively run the enterprises overseas as a majority vote of the crew over their. What? The committee who would effectively run the enterprises as overseers unless a majority vote of the crew overrode is one word. overrode their decisions. Each sector of each business would follow this 11-person model. It goes to 11. There would be a captain of each 11-person committee, and the vote of the 10 others could override with an 11th vote thrown to the assembly of each sector where decisions were applicable. Every venture would include an odd number of voters, no matter what. In cases of even numbers of people deciding, the network would add a randomizer for the applicable jurisdiction, even on trains, airplanes, and spaceships, as long as the rules weren't broken for that vote. That's, again, oddly specific. Oh, we're down to murder again. Okay. At this point, no murder, etc. This is why freedom of speech is a bad thing. It lets Lucas put shit like this out here, and it lowers the IQ of anyone who reads it. No murder, etc. Each assembly and committee would allow votes from all people at a 12th grade reading, writing, and emotional maturity level, which would exclude Lucas, of course. Whatever the 12th grade level would be at that time, anytime would still exclude Lucas, no matter the age, which would be assessed once a month. Are they assessing the age once a month or the educational level once a month? Clear, because he does not have the writing ability of a 12th grader. Be assessed once a month by a short 30-minute written exam, 30-minute physical challenge, and health check to make sure everyone was fresh and mature and fit for duty and up to date on current matters. So Lucas basically just completely disqualified himself from his own fantasy government because he doesn't hit any of those marks. The same would apply to scientific councils, but the requirement would have to be a university master's level understanding of the above. So he definitely could not be a PhD in age gap reading because he doesn't even understand the fucking abstracts. Hard. Okay, we're beyond murder. Each council and committee would also be given a report card every month as a whole, and individuals by the concordant assembly overseeing those councils and committees. Any individual working within a council and committee not receiving an 80% approval rating from all voting, given the 10% requirement, would be forced to step down, and the council committee would be replaced by the assembly of that jurisdiction after a brief 5-day or less scientific review of no less than 1 day. Individuals serving group entities would be given 2 chances to improve following a 30-day break to brush up on their skills after both attempts. 2 failures to reach 80% within the individual would have to retire and seek employment in another enterprise or as a lesser crew member in the same enterprise, or take a break and live on the universal basic income alone if that was their choice. The individual would be allowed another attempt in a year. Why? Failing the attempt a year later would result in a permanent ban from that particular council or committee. Individuals deemed unfit for society due to dangers to others, followed by grammar again, Christ. Individuals deemed unfit for society due to danger to others, followed by incarceration or annoyance to others after 3 attempted relocations to anywhere the individual decided upon living after being kicked out would be incarcerated in holes that resemble college dorms instead of jails or prisons, with movements restricted to that property and rehabilitated with patient-centered therapy and patient-centered medication options. Each hold would have you could go there just for being annoying, huh? That's where Lucas would end up. Each hold would have indoor and outdoor areas that would be peaceful and tranquil, though isolated environments on the outskirts of cities and towns. Individuals outside the realm of help would be confined to a surveillance smaller living quarters with indoor and outdoor areas as well, away from others on the hold facility with 24-hour staff on hand to assist the ailing individual with assessments given every month to move the individual to the larger confinement before being released into society at large if the ailing individual wishes to move on and has met all requirements. What the? No rights, including consensual sexual freedoms from others with the ailing individual, would be taken away, and visits would be allowed on any day. Individuals in the assembly could abstain from society as a whole altogether. I would absolutely choose this option in this scenario. For any time period and live off grid in rural areas in the wilderness, opposed to wilderness in the city. Suburban areas or off. If you're off grid, you're not in a goddamn suburban area. It shelters by choice if no damage was brought to the grid. If you're living off grid, you're not going to damage the grid. You're off the fucking grid. You're not going to damage. You're not going to be near the. You're off. Do you know what off grid means, Lucas? Do you know what off grid? You don't know what off grid means. Off gridders. Individuals would also be allowed to live on grid as well as in either the wilderness, suburban, or urban. What's the fucking point then? How much longer is this? Anyone given technology would be allowed to leave the planet, galaxy, or universe at any time in lieu of detainment, as long as that technology was fully understood, able to be replicated and tamed by the current understanding of science. You just fuck off the planet. You send Lucas off the planet. Does that work out of the universe galaxy? Okay. All right. Everyone would have a smartphone connected to the internet to remain within 20 feet of the individual for whom the device was assigned. Each individual would be required to use the device for at least one logged hour a day. It would be perfectly legal to opt out of owning the device or to opt back in at any time. That it's not required. It's not required to have it if you can opt out. It's not. You know what required means? It means you can opt out. If an hour had not been logged per day, that individual will be located by DNA scan. That is not how location scans work. Use the GPS in the phone. Use the GPS. By DNA scan and peaceably confronted for safety purposes and asked to log on an hour, given a heart rate scan for consciousness. Shouldn't they do that before they talk to them or confront them? Check to maybe see if they are still alive. You're gonna scan their heart rate and consciousness via DNA to make sure the individual has been alive and awake for at least 1 hour. If the heart rate is stopped, the individual will be located and taken to the morgue. If he's gonna wake him up, otherwise, I guess. If you have technology to be able to let you leave the universe when you get like fucking sick of Earth, can you not just like bring someone back from a heart attack, or is that like beyond the technology of this fucked up Earth thing he's got going here? If 12 consecutive hours of sleep in a row was detected, that is a weekend. Medical would revive to make sure the individual is well. If not, they would be given care in a hospital until healthy enough to continue. Just because you like to fucking sleep, I guess. I like to sleep. If not, the individual will be given care. Blah, blah, blah. A smart device would turn on with a consecutive reading of a fingerprint, DNA scan, retinal scan, heart rate scan, adrenaline level, cortisol level, oxy. Again, he doesn't understand what that is either. And a quick vocal lie detector test if the adrenaline level was above normal to be registered as fear, depression, or anger rather than lust with increased oxytocin. Doesn't know what any of this means. To make sure the smart device was not opened by coercion from others? What? Depression would incur an assessment. This is depressing to read. Depression would incur an assessment from a suicide prevention person at a certain depleted serotonin and dopamine level, and in-person help if depression was registering a need for intervention after prolonged duration enough to warrant serious concern. Hopelessness of separate from what could be considered routine intermittent sadness. That's a mouthful. The phone would also read increased electrical levels that could dictate or that could indicate any explosive was nearby, and increased chemical levels to indicate either poison or weapon was present that was not registered to the smart device or the owner of the smart. This is like a shitty version of 1984. Like just like a worse version. Like if Orwell had like no creativity and had maybe like hit his head a few times. That's what this is. This is like a shitty version of 1984. And it's not nearly as enjoyable to read. The device would also scan the vicinity for the DNA of any fugitives and missing persons while in use or dormant. It's not, if it's scanning something, it's not dormant. You don't get a fucking dictionary. They're free. Dictionaries are free online, Lucas. Use a dictionary before you use big boy words. Any individuals registering fear while missing persons or fugitives were in the vicinity prior to the arrival of law enforcement would be questioned with a lie detector if not asleep and experiencing fear while dreaming. Fear while dreaming would be ignored and the individual would be allowed to sleep, given that the heart rate was nominal, not dangerously elevated, and cardiac arrest or stopped. The device would also scan for pathogens and poisons in the vicinity, whether dormant or activated by. Dormant means it's not doing anything. You can't. That's. Oh, it's almost at the end. Thank God. Oh, it's more about the device. Also, a smoke detector and a temperature sensor with the appropriate action taken for each. If the device quit working unexpectedly, an official would show up to assess the problem. The device would be solar powered with a wireless axial attached to the light source, attached to infrared, attached to attached to the back of the device. It could power several devices at once. This would be the solar collector on the device itself, and for redundancy purposes, to keep the device running while an indoor structure attached to any outdoor light source, such as a window solar panel on the outside of every room of every building, and outside every window of every building. That I am not rambling. That is how he wrote this. That he wrote that like this. The device would be solar powered with a wireless axial attached to a light source, attached to infrared, attached to a solar battery, attached back to the device that could power several devices at once. There would also be a solar collector on the device itself for redundancy purposes to keep the device running while in an indoor structure attached to any outdoor light source, such as a window or solar panel, on the outside of every room of every building and outside of every window of every building. Why? This is so unnecessarily complicated and stupid, obviously, but why make it this stupid complicated? The device can be plugged in like smartphones are today as a third redundancy in the form of electrical battery connected to a wall socket. The chance of the device shutting down for unplanned or routine maintenance. The chance of the device shutting down unplanned for routine maintenance. Unplanned for routine maintenance. If it's routine maintenance, it is not unplanned. Routine maintenance is by definition planned. You maybe he meant to use the word "or" there, but like, why would you? If it's routine maintenance, then wouldn't the assembly system know, and you wouldn't have to come in and whatever? The chance for the device shutting down unplanned for routine maintenance or replacement and completely unannounced would be rare and cause for concern. If it's routine maintenance, it's not unannounced. It's not. That's not how it works. What does that have to do? That doesn't even. He doesn't even like tie into how this works with the fucking assembly. This is just like a way to track people. So I'm pretty sure for this like phone solar battery tracker health monitor Fitbit lie detector DNA scanner. I'm pretty sure at some point in his life he probably had to read 1984 because he was in high school at the same time as I was, and we had to read 1984 a couple of years. And I get the feeling that like this last part with this bizarre cell phone device that he thought the technology in 1984 was cool, but seemed too bulky or easy, or he thought he could do it better. But this no, this is just I, I I don't know if this is more stupid than the assembly part, or if just like altogether it's one big huge clusterfuck of somebody who doesn't meet their own intelligence requirements to participate in the government fantasy that they created. But not a shocker, Lucas writes himself out of his own fantasies all the time. I cannot believe I read through that. So yeah, if you want to look at that or the bizarre libertarian socialist bullshit thing he tried to make, which is at least word salad, but it's not completely insane. It's stupid and it wouldn't work, and it's completely not correct in any of its views, but it's at least not completely insane. Plus, there's also Lake GeoCities page art because he made art for that local party. Yeah, so I'm gonna go do literally anything else right now to get what I just read out of my entire brain, and then probably sleep for 12 hours and hope the government doesn't show up, take me away.
as an older guy interested in younger males and a libtard or whatever you want to call me,